My beloved child. Before the sun fully awakened the world this morning, something quietly unfolded behind a closed door. No crowd witnessed it. No announcement was made. Yet the choice formed in that quiet moment carries the weight to influence more lives than anyone in that home could have imagined. The room was still. A warm cup rested untouched on the table. Morning light slipped gently through the curtains, illuminating photographs collected over many years. Faces filled with memories, celebrations, disappointments, and prayers that had remained unanswered for far longer than expected. In that silence, someone who had once held firm opinions found herself thinking differently. Not because anyone pressured her. Not because someone argued. But because time has a remarkable way of softening hearts that once believed they had seen the whole story. And somehow, your name entered her thoughts again. If you have spent nights wondering whether people misunderstood your heart, if you have quietly carried the weight of being judged before anyone truly knew you, then this moment may feel strangely familiar. There are seasons when kindness goes unnoticed. There are years when patience seems invisible. Yet goodness has a way of leaving gentle fingerprints upon every life it touches, even when no one speaks about it. This morning became one of those moments. Your loved one's mother remembered something so small that most people would have forgotten it. It was not a grand gesture. It was not a dramatic event. It was simply an act of grace you showed when no recognition was expected. Only now did she begin to understand what it revealed about your character. But that was not the moment that changed everything. Because another memory quietly followed. One she had tried to dismiss. One conversation she believed no longer mattered. Yet today it returned with surprising clarity. As she sat in thoughtful silence, she began comparing who you truly are with the picture she had once accepted without question. And for the first time, those two pictures no longer matched. Sometimes healing begins with a single question. What if I was wrong? It is one of the hardest questions a person can ask, especially after carrying certainty for a long time. Yet wisdom often arrives wrapped in humility. The strongest hearts are not those that never change. They are the ones willing to grow. Perhaps that is why your own journey has felt so long. Every disappointment taught compassion. Every unanswered prayer deepened your faith. Every lonely season quietly strengthened parts of you that no one else could see. Although you wondered whether those silent sacrifices meant anything, heaven never wasted them. Even when you felt forgotten. Your story continued unfolding beyond your sight. And while you were trying to make peace with delays, other hearts were changing in ways you could never have orchestrated yourself. There is comfort in knowing that not every answer arrives with noise. Some arrive gently. Like dawn replacing darkness before anyone notices the exact moment night disappears. This morning carried that same quiet beauty. No celebration. No dramatic announcement. Only the beginning of a different perspective. Yet what happened next was never meant to be revealed so quickly. Because while she was reflecting on everything she had misunderstood, someone unexpectedly entered the room. The expression on their face suggested they already knew something she did not. What they carried into that conversation would awaken another hidden truth, one connected to your life in a way neither of them anticipated. If this message resonates with you, perhaps you already understand that the greatest turning points often begin with ordinary mornings that seem no different from any other. But this morning was different. Not because of what was spoken first, but because of the question that was about to be asked, a question that would uncover a feeling hidden for far longer than anyone realized. And once that question was spoken aloud, nothing in that family would be viewed quite the same again. The footsteps paused at the doorway, as though the person standing there sensed that something meaningful had already begun. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The silence itself seemed to hold years of unspoken thoughts. Then came a gentle question. Have you been thinking about them again? There was no surprise in the voice, only quiet understanding. She looked down at her hands before answering. Sometimes the heart searches for the right words long before the lips are ready to speak them. Finally, she nodded. I have, she whispered. More than I expected. That simple confession opened a door neither of them had intended to unlock. For months, perhaps even longer, every conversation about you had been shaped by assumptions. Pieces of your story had been gathered from scattered opinions, incomplete moments, and emotions that clouded clear judgment. Yet this morning, those fragments no longer felt convincing. Instead, she began remembering details that no one else had noticed. She remembered your patience when circumstances gave you every reason to become bitter. She remembered how you chose dignity over arguments. She remembered the quiet respect you showed, even when it was never returned in equal measure. These were not dramatic moments. They were almost invisible. But wisdom often recognizes what excitement overlooks. If you have ever wondered whether goodness matters when no one seems to acknowledge it, hear this with an open heart: quiet integrity has a way of revealing itself in its own time. Its reward is rarely immediate. Yet when the moment arrives, it reaches hearts far more deeply than loud words ever could. As these memories settled into the room, another realization followed. She wasn't only reconsidering her opinion of you. She was reconsidering the advice she had once given. That thought rested heavily upon her. Not because she wished to dwell on regret, but because she suddenly understood that even well-meaning people can sometimes encourage decisions before they truly know someone's heart. Grace makes room for that realization. And healing begins there. The person beside her noticed the change. I've never seen you look at this situation this way, they said softly. She smiled, though there was sadness behind it. Neither have I. Outside, the morning breeze stirred the trees. Sunlight grew stronger, filling the room with warmth that seemed to mirror the quiet change taking place inside. Yet something remained unfinished. There was one memory she had never shared with anyone. Not even with the family. Not even with the person now sitting across from her. It had happened weeks earlier. A chance encounter. Only a few minutes long. Nothing extraordinary to anyone else. But something you said during that brief meeting had stayed with her ever since. At the time, she brushed it aside. Today, those words returned with unexpected clarity. Not because they were clever. Not because they were persuasive. But because they revealed the kind of heart that cannot be easily imitated. And suddenly she understood something that had escaped her before. Character is revealed most clearly when someone believes no one is watching. If this sounds familiar, perhaps you know what it feels like to keep doing the right thing without immediate recognition. Perhaps you've wondered if your quiet prayers have echoed into empty spaces. They have not. Every act of grace leaves a trace, even when it cannot yet be seen. Sometimes the answers to those prayers begin in another person's heart long before they appear in your own life. But that realization was only the beginning. Because just as peace began settling over the conversation, a phone resting on the table suddenly lit up. The screen displayed a name neither of them expected to see that morning. The room grew still again. No one reached for the phone immediately. Both of them understood that whoever was calling had no idea this quiet conversation had already changed so much. Yet somehow, the timing felt impossible to ignore. She slowly reached toward the phone, her heart carrying a calm she had not felt in a long time. She sensed that answering this call might confirm everything she had been quietly realizing. Or reveal one final piece of the story that had remained hidden from everyone until now. As her fingers hovered over the screen, she took one slow breath. Because the voice waiting on the other end was about to say something that would transform reflection into action. And once those words were spoken, there would be no returning to the way things had been before. Her hand rested lightly on the phone for one more heartbeat before she answered. Hello? The familiar voice on the other end carried warmth, but there was also hesitation, as if the caller had been searching for the right moment to reach out. "I hope I'm not calling at a bad time," the voice said softly. She glanced across the room. The conversation from only moments before was still fresh in her mind, and somehow this call felt connected to it in a way she could not yet explain. "No," she replied gently. "In fact, your timing couldn't be more unusual." For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Sometimes silence is not empty. Sometimes it is where truth gathers the courage to be heard. Then the caller shared something unexpected. "I've been thinking a lot lately," they admitted. "About people we may have misunderstood." Those words settled over the room like the first drops of rain after a long season of drought. She closed her eyes. Only an hour earlier, she had been asking herself that very question. Now someone else, without knowing her thoughts, had spoken it aloud. Coincidence? Perhaps. Or perhaps certain conversations begin quietly in many hearts before they are finally spoken between people. If you have ever prayed for understanding instead of quick answers, you know this feeling. Real change often arrives gently. It does not force itself into a room. It waits until hearts are ready to receive it. The caller continued. "I realized something this week. We spent so much time discussing circumstances that we forgot to talk about character." Those words lingered. Character. Not appearances. Not assumptions. Not rumors. Character. The room seemed different now. The morning sunlight had grown brighter, illuminating every corner that had remained in shadow just minutes before. It was as though the light itself was quietly reminding them that clarity often comes little by little, never all at once. She looked toward a family photograph resting nearby. Faces smiling. Years captured in a single frame. How many stories had unfolded since that picture was taken? How many hearts had changed without anyone noticing? Then another realization came. Perhaps families are not strengthened because everyone always agrees. Perhaps they grow stronger because someone eventually chooses understanding over pride. That choice is never easy. Yet it is almost always worth making. The caller lowered their voice. "Can I tell you something I've never admitted before?" She felt her heart become still. "Of course." I watched them more carefully than anyone realized. Your name was never spoken. It didn't need to be. Both of them already knew who the conversation had quietly returned to. I kept expecting their kindness to fade when things became difficult, the caller confessed. But it never did. The words carried no excitement. Only quiet certainty. And honestly, that surprised me. Sometimes the greatest compliment is not spoken in celebration. Sometimes it is spoken in humble honesty after someone realizes they were wrong. If this message feels close to your heart, perhaps you've experienced moments when your greatest victories happened without applause. Those victories matter. Every unseen act of patience. Every gentle response. Every prayer whispered through disappointment. None of it has been forgotten. Not by the people whose hearts are changing. And certainly not by the one who has walked beside you through every season. Yet what happened next was never meant to be revealed so soon. As the conversation continued, she slowly opened a nearby drawer, searching for a notepad to write something down. Instead, her fingers touched an old folded envelope. She frowned. She didn't remember placing it there. Its edges had softened with time, as though it had been waiting quietly for this exact morning. There was no address on the front. Only a few handwritten words. She stared at them without speaking. The caller noticed the silence. "Is everything all right?" She could barely answer. I just found something." Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the strange feeling that certain moments are arranged long before we understand their purpose. The envelope held a memory she had completely forgotten. A memory connected to you. A memory that would explain why her heart had been changing long before today's conversation ever began. Slowly. Very slowly. She turned the envelope over. And as she prepared to open it, one forgotten sentence written years ago was about to reveal a truth that no one in the family had ever fully understood. The room became so quiet that even the gentle ticking of the clock seemed louder than before. She held the faded envelope with both hands, careful not to damage the delicate paper that had quietly survived the passing years. It did not look extraordinary. No elegant seal. No special markings. Yet something about it carried the unmistakable weight of unfinished history. The caller remained on the line. "I'll wait," the voice said softly. She offered only a quiet, grateful breath before unfolding the letter. The paper released with a faint sound, like a memory finally allowing itself to be heard. The handwriting was familiar. Not because she had seen it often, but because certain words have a way of leaving a lasting impression on the heart. She began reading silently. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The note spoke of ordinary things: gratitude, family, hope, and the quiet belief that difficult seasons do not last forever. Then her eyes stopped on a single sentence. It was simple. Gentle. Almost easy to overlook. "Please never judge a person's future by the chapter you first met them in." She read it again. And then once more. Those words settled deeply within her. They reminded her that every life is still being written, and no one should be defined by a single misunderstanding, a difficult season, or an incomplete story. If you have ever felt that people formed opinions about you before they truly knew your heart, these words may feel deeply personal. Perhaps you have carried the silent hope that one day someone would see beyond the surface. That hope is not misplaced. Sometimes understanding arrives long after the misunderstanding. But when it does, it has the power to heal more than anyone expected. She lowered the letter and wiped away a quiet tear. Not because she was overwhelmed by sadness, but because clarity often carries its own emotion. The caller gently asked, "What did you find?" She smiled through the silence. "I found a reminder of the person I should have been looking at all along." The word surprised even her. They came from a place deeper than logic. A place where pride had finally given way to compassion. Outside, the morning had fully awakened. Birds gathered along the fence. A breeze carried the scent of fresh rain, though the sky remained bright. It felt as though the day itself was whispering that new beginnings rarely announce themselves with great fanfare. They simply arrive. One quiet decision at a time. But that was not the moment that changed everything. Because as she carefully folded the letter, something slipped from inside the envelope and floated gently onto the floor. Neither of them had known it was there. She bent down and picked it up. It was an old photograph. Its colors had faded, but the memory it held remained remarkably clear. She stared at it for several long moments. The caller could hear only her breathing. "What is it?" they asked. She answered almost in a whisper. "This picture tells a story I never understood." She looked closely at every face captured in that forgotten moment. There was joy. There was sincerity. And tucked quietly into the corner of the photograph was a detail she had never noticed before. A small gesture. A simple act of kindness. Nothing dramatic. Yet it revealed something about your character that had gone unseen all those years. Suddenly, pieces that had seemed unrelated began fitting together. The quiet patience. The respectful words. The willingness to forgive without demanding recognition. None of it had been accidental. It had always been part of who you were. The realization filled the room with a profound sense of peace. If this message resonates with you, remember this. You never know which small act of grace will one day become the evidence that changes someone's heart. The kindness you offered years ago may still be speaking, even when your own voice has fallen silent. Yet another mystery remained. On the back of the photograph, written in careful handwriting, was a date, and beneath it, a short note. She turned the picture over completely. The ink had faded, but one line was still perfectly clear. As she began reading those forgotten words aloud, she suddenly recognized the name of the person who had written them. It was the one name she never expected to see. And the truth hidden behind that signature would finally reveal why this morning had unfolded exactly as it did.